This is Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men, and you're listening to Start the World.
All right, I am joined today by Ryan Michler. He is one of the best known and most respected advocates of masculinity today. He's the host of a popular podcast, The Order of Man. His website is orderofman.com. He's the leader of a men's group titled The Iron Council. And he's the author of a book titled Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. So, Brian, thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here, man. Looking forward to the call. I know we bounced around back and forth for a couple of weeks, but man, I've enjoyed our conversations and friendship, so it's good to be here.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for coming on. So I'm going to start out, this is a little odd, but I found this the other day. There's a lot of our work that overlaps, which I think is good.
Yeah.
Because we're saying the right things. And so I was doing some research on Hercules, actually, yesterday. And I came across this quote, and I'm going to read this, and we'll start off the podcast with that. But it's from Xenophon, and he lived about 400 BC, military leader, famous for writing Anabasis. He was a student of Socrates, and so he wrote a defense of Socrates, just saying what good influence he had on the men around him and so forth.
Okay.
And so this quote is from that defense of Socrates, but it's a story about Hercules. And it's a story about Hercules, and he's asked to choose between vice, like when he was young, it's become part of the lore of Hercules, that he's asked to use between vice, which is kakia, and virtue, which is arati, or excellence, which we are both familiar with, I'm sure.
Sure.
And it's kind of funny because it's the way it's set up is that kakia is kind of, they're both women, obviously, they're goddesses representing these concepts.
Okay.
And kakia is kind of dressed up, well, let's say strumpet, I think is how she's portrayed, as a strumpet.
Okay.
It's a safe word to use.
Got it.
And then arate is obviously, excellence. So excellence lecturing Hercules, because Vice is saying, hey, I can give you a life of all this pleasure and everything's going to be easy and it's going to be okay and no big deal. And Arati says, nothing that is really good and admirable is granted by the gods of men without some effort and application. If you want the gods to be gracious to you, you must worship the gods. If you wish to be loved by your friends, you must be kind to your friends. If you desire to be honored by a state, you must help that state. If you expect to be admired for your fine qualities by the whole of Greece, you must try to benefit Greece. If you want your land to produce abundant crops, you must look after your land. If you expect to make money from your livestock, you must take care of your livestock. If you have an impulse to extend your influence by war, and you want to be able to free your friends and subdue your enemies, you must both learn the actual arts of war from those who understand them and practice the proper way of applying them. And if you want to be physically efficient, you must train your body to be subject to your reason and develop it with hard work and sweat.
It's awesome. Love it.
Right? It's a lot of the things that you're talking about in your book, Sovereignty, is like, this is all on you, is basically the concept of the book, right? This is all on you. You need to take responsibility for your life.
Right.
And, and before we get into that more, because I want you to get into that and explain that more and talk more about your book. But
sure, yeah.
Something I may have even asked you this in person last time when we hung out and did your podcast, but I think it's important. You've really put yourself out there as an advocate for masculinity. And I think I always knew when I was about to do this, and obviously it's come true, and it's for you as well. The first thing that people do when you put yourself out there as an advocate for masculinity is that they're going to attack yours.
Of course.
So like, who are you
to tell me? Right.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to attack men, women, everybody. They're going to be like, well, who are you? And I mean, it kind of takes balls.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And, like you have all these celebrities and these actors that men looked up to and so forth. And, they're icons of masculinity, but, when they talk to the press and so forth, they are the first to pander to feminists and they're the first to trash men.
Their characters are iconic of masculinity, but them themselves are not typically.
Exactly.
Right.
But then some of them, it's like, you're a guy who loves learning martial arts to be in action movies and goes out and shoots guns all day. Like, do you really even believe the stuff that's coming out of your mouth, or are you just, I think, like we all have our role in life, whatever, and they want to get good roles in movies.
Yes.
And so they're going to say whatever you're supposed to say.
Of course.
I think is a lot of it.
Do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. But, obviously you put yourself out there, there's a lot of risk involved, a lot of attacks on you personally, and it's a lot safer to not do this. As far as
it's certainly more comfortable. Sure.
Yeah. It's a lot, why have people insult you every day? Like that's
right.
So something I was wondering, did you feel that you were called to do this? Like, this is your mission?
I don't know if I felt that way when I started. Because
Right.
So I had another podcast. It was all geared towards financial advice because that's my background.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved the medium of podcasting, but I didn't want to continue that conversation. And I had been following Brett McKay, who's a mutual friend of ours with Art of Manliness, and seeing what he's doing and other people. And I thought, man, this is really interesting. I actually want to learn more about being a good and capable man, which there's a distinction. You and I, I'm sure, will talk about that because you actually introduced me to that concept. Anyway, so I figured, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, but I didn't do it as like fulfill a calling. I did it because it's something that sounded interesting. But being 5 years into this thing now, yeah, it's a calling, most definitely. I didn't realize it at the time, but the more that I learned, the more that I grew, the more that I thrust myself into it, the more that I'm trying to improve myself as a man, the more I realized this is what I was called to do.
Nice. Yeah. No, I mean, I kind of feel the same way. Like,
yeah,
like when I started doing this, no one was talking about it really. And now it's, so many years later, you have, I mean, you're friends with Jocko, I think. And you have guys like that up there. I just had John Fitch, who's a UFC fighter, came out to the 21 convention and was hanging out. And I was just on his show recently and he was on mine. And I mean, he's interested in this. He's talking about red pill stuff and all this stuff. It's all these guys who wouldn't have been talking about this, like 10 years ago.
Right.
Are starting to get into the game. And I think it's good.
It is good. These conversations need to be had. For a very long time, the only conversation that was happening was the vocal minority, and it is a minority, that are screaming and crying and complaining about toxic masculinity and the tyrannical, patriarchy. So this counter argument to it is a very positive thing, and it needs to actually be had. So it's good to be at the forefront of it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what I keep trying to explain to people over time is that, the patriarchy, that whole narrative, and toxic masculinity is even like this made up new thing that's just repackaged, the same ideas that they've always been talking about. Right. There's nothing new in that. I mean, they've been saying the same thing. You can read feminism from the 70s, and they're saying the same thing. They want the same things out of men and so forth, which is basically just do whatever we say.
Right.
But
again, do what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff isn't new. And I think, you've been doing this for a while now, and I'm sure you get these guys all the time who are like, can you believe that they said this today?
Yeah.
And you're like, actually, yeah, I can.
Believe that.
Yeah, I heard it last year too, and the year before that. Yeah.
People will say, I made a post about toxic masculinity, and I don't like the term for a lot of different reasons, but
that's terrible.
One of the reasons that I do not use and approve of the term, I guess is the right word, is because it's misconstrued, or it could be interpreted as all masculinity is toxic. And when I say that, people are like, no, nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. I'm like, actually, here's an article that is titled "All Masculinity is Toxic."
Right.
And here's American Psychological Association's study from 2019 that suggests that stoicism, aggression, dominance, competitiveness, and traits and characteristics we generally consider masculine are inherently toxic and destructive to young boys.
Right.
So when you say that nobody actually believes that all masculinity is toxic, that just isn't true. There's plenty of people that believe masculinity in and of itself is bad and needs to be conditioned out of our young men.
100%. Yeah. And like I said, they've been saying it for decades. It's just now getting traction. I mean, I remember it in the 90s, but it's really now gotten traction to where it's mainstream. like completely mainstream, but they've been
Yeah,
saying it for a while.
well, and I think part of the reason we see that is because these people who are proponents of the ideas of toxic masculinity and the extreme feminism are better. They're better marketers than they used to be, right? So now they can cover it up. They can get people onto their side. They can make it cool. They use social media. So they're better marketers than they ever were, which is easier than to fall prey to believing some of these things that, might have a hint of truth, right? There might be some elements that you think, well, that's actually a valid point. And then you cloak in all this other stuff with it, and you have to throw it out because, it's like putting these little into law when congressmen throw these little extra things into these law packages, right? So you think, well, I have to accept the whole thing now because it has some good and some negative. It's like, nah, if it's wrong, it's wrong. If the well's been poisoned, all of the water is bad. Like you can't take out and extract some of the water.
Yeah. I was interested in gender studies actually my whole life, like since like maybe it's seven. I was reading Camille Paglia at like 17, and
is that right?
Yeah. I mean, so I've always been in this, but I really came from the other side. I mean, I was an artistic kid and whatever, and I believed a lot of the feminist stuff when I was a kid, and so I knew their arguments already because I was making them.
Right.
It's not like I was
position to be from.
Yeah, it's not like I just learned about this stuff yesterday. And one of the reasons, and I think one of the things that you kind of just touched on, is that there are some bad representatives of masculinity that I think rub kids the wrong way. In terms of like this. I saw a comment on something I said today because I asked a question about heroes. And I saw one guy, and it's like I almost know what he looks like before you like even click on the link. One guy said, "Real men don't need heroes."
Yes.
And I'm like, that's the guy who, when I was 12 years old, I was like, masculinity is dumb.
Right.
You're dumb.
Course.
And so I think a lot of guys have that kind of experience where they have this kind of blustery, chest thumping retard who then and that's their representative of what masculinity is. And so then they listen to what these feminists and stuff are saying, and then they hear some of that, and they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, he's kind of fake and full of it and whatever."
Of course.
And so I think that's how they get a lot of guys in, because there are guys who are bad representatives for it.
There is, and not only that, but then you have an entire generation and more of boys who are being raised by women. Their dad's out of the picture for whatever reason. I'm not casting blame when I talk about that. Like sometimes it's a husband's fault, sometimes it's a wife's fault, sometimes it's both. But for whatever reason, dad's no longer in the picture. We ship them off to schools, and predominantly they're taught by women.
Yep.
So when you talk about coming from this other side of things, like I actually come from that side too, in that I was raised by primarily my mother, and my sister was there too, right? And so that's who I was raised by. And for a long time, I had a very hard time relating with men. Fortunately, my mom was intelligent enough and cared about me enough to realize that she alone could not make me a man. It's impossible. She could teach me elements of being a good human being, but not entirely how to be a good man. So she got me involved in Boy Scouts. She got me involved in competitive sports. I joined the military. So I learned a lot of this stuff later on in life. I mean, I wasn't 15, 16, 17, 18 years old until I really started to get introduced to other men who cared about me, who wanted to teach me what it meant to be a man and help me become a more capable man.
Yeah.
But it is funny when you hear from people who say a real man. Anytime somebody says that, if they start their sentence with that,
it's always wrong.
Right. But if they say a real man doesn't need a man to tell us how to behave, like that's actually the exact opposite of the truth. Like a man needs to be taught by other men. There's a proverb that says the boys must be initiated or they'll burn the village down. And this is true. Like boys need to be initiated by men, not by women, but by men. And they need to be taught how to harness this masculine energy and power that's coursing through their veins.
Oh, absolutely. It's just historically wrong. I mean, like men have always been taught to be men by other men, and they've always had role models. And it's like knights had squires. Like this is how it works. Like you need to be, because otherwise you're just kind of
It's a
running
very
around crazy.
egocentric thought process. Like, I have it all figured out. Nobody can teach me anything, and I'm going to do this all on myself, which is egocentric, and it's also destructive because you're exposing yourself to a whole lot of blind spots that wouldn't be there had you opened your eyes and mind to the fact that maybe there's somebody who knows more than you about some things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very American in that way too. It's like that very kind of Clint Eastwood, like rolling through
James
town,
Bond, Clint
yeah,
Eastwood.
yeah,
Who else do you have? You have, I mean, yeah, Jason Bourne.
right,
Right? These are the guys who, the Marlboro Men, right? We think of them and we're like, that is the epitome of masculinity, and they always fly solo.
yeah. He's a broken dude who can't hang out anywhere because he's
right.
like
Nobody
has
likes him.
social
Nobody
he has
wants him
social
around.
issues. Like
That's right. Exactly right.
he's gonna roll through town, shoot some people, and then leave.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
But
Which is why you have to keep moving along, because you burn relationships and
Yeah.
nobody likes you, and so you have to be a loner. You're forced to be a loner.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not a good model,
No.
and really it exposes blind spots, but it also exposes, I think, to anyone who is not looking at it from that perspective, it looks like exactly what it is. Like when everybody starts with the well, real man, da, 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 it looks like
Right.
you're just thumping your chest and trying to look cooler than you are.
Right.
Because it's kind of silly. But
then you have this opposite end of the spectrum, and I heard from a guy on Instagram. He was civil to his defense, and most
Sure.
people are, but we were having this disagreement. He said something to the effect of expecting men, and I'm paraphrasing here, but expecting men to prove themselves places unnecessary anxiety on men. And I thought, like, that is the weakest perspective that I've ever heard. It's like expecting you to perform, expecting for you to do something, to show up in a certain way, it places unnecessary anxiety. Well, why don't we all just do nothing? Like, we'll curl up in the bedroom in our bed. We'll never get out of bed. We'll never lift weights. We'll never exert ourselves. We'll never go to college or earn new credentials or designations. We'll never push ourselves. We'll never ask for a promotion, because all of that is placing anxiety on us. I wouldn't consider it unnecessary. I would consider it actually necessary stress for us to improve. And the fact is that, and I think you agree on this, and maybe we could hash this out a little bit. It's like a man actually does have to prove himself. So you and I
forever. It never ends.
It never ends.
Yeah.
We're male, right? And
Right.
so we're males, right? By default, because we have the chromosomes and the biology, male. That's not a choice. Like, it is what it is. We were born male.
Right.
But you said this on our podcast when we did it together. You have to choose to be a man.
Yeah.
Which means there's certain activities you need to engage in. There's certain ambitions that you ought to have. There's certain roles that you need to become more capable of stepping into. And there's certain results that you need to produce. I know that there's a lot of people who have a hard time with that because it's placing, quote unquote, unnecessary anxiety on them. But that's the load that we're meant to bear. And you're built to bear it. So, like, develop it. And so you can capitalize on it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's your potential.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the ideas that I've been playing with in my stuff, is that I really think order is what men are all about. And we'll all the things that you've said, we'll get into that later. Like, we protect order and we create order, and
Right. Right.
and so we perpetuate order. We're all about it's about order and hierarchy, and that's what really a lot of this mentality comes. They don't like hierarchy.
No.
And the idea is that, like you said, anxiety, if you're not at the top of the hierarchy, you're supposed to feel terrible about yourself. And no one's supposed to feel terrible. It's a very kind of female-centric way of looking at the world, in terms of everyone, let's hug the world and no one should feel bad.
Feelings, emotion-driven.
Yeah. And, but men actually like hierarchy. And, you can be that's what we've always set up, always and everywhere. We set up hierarchy because if you don't have a goal, the top of the hierarchy is the goal. And actually the word hierarchy comes from the same word as, basically divine. It means higher. Uh, Hier, it comes from the same root that implies divinity. Hierophany is another word that is similar to that, and so it's divine order. Right. Basically, is hierarchy actually means divine order.
Interesting.
And so we've always said, like, well, what's the most perfect thing that I can imagine? Let's all try and be more like that.
Right.
And we're not supposed to be like, oh, if there's a perfect thing, then we can't try and be better. We just have to be sad. You know, and that's, it's a terrible way to look at life, and you'll never improve or get better at anything. Because if, it's like with that, everybody's a winner, then nobody's a winner kind of thing.
We're all the same. Yeah, it's funny because people do complain, especially like you see it in sports, like, we don't want anybody to lose or feel bad about themselves. I'm like, you're supposed to feel bad if you lose.
Yeah.
That's the point. So, like, guys, some people will say, well, men can't express their emotions. It's not that you can't express them. It's that you need to understand what they're telling you. And if you're sad or upset that you lost or didn't perform the way you should have, good. That's how you're supposed to feel.
Yeah.
So you don't do it again. So you
do
get better.
Exactly. Yeah, do better. Yeah.
You look at all of these hierarchies. I mean, even go to look for examples of like a phallic symbol, right? You look at the Washington Monument, or you look at pyramids. You look at a totem pole. Nobody wants to be the low man on the totem pole. What do you got to do? Fight and claw and do everything you can to get to the top, because that's where it's at and that's where we want to be.
Yeah. And I've often talked to my buddy Greg, because he had the realization, because he organizes groups of men for lots of different things. And actually just being on the totem pole at all is kind of, in many ways, a thing that men want. Because not everyone's going to be at top, and sometimes the guy at the bottom just wants to be there,
right?
And that's okay too. Like the army needs cooks. Like it's not all special forces, guys. It's there's all kinds of levels and all kinds of support and all kinds of things that need to happen. And so as long as you're on the same team and you're working towards the same goal, you're a valuable part of it.
And you're kicking ass at whatever role you play.
Exactly.
Like if you're a cook in the military, then be the best damn cook that the military ever knew.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody can do a great job at whatever they have to do. And not everybody has to be at the top to be happy. Because a lot of them, hierarchy, the other thing about that is that there's always trade-offs. Mm-hmm. It's really easy. I always compare it to like lifting. I used to hang out with power lifters a lot. And I know what you have to do to become a competitive power lifter, to be at the top level of that, at the elite level. And I was never really willing to make that trade-off because I had other things going on. I have books to write. I have things going on. Right. I'm not going to like break my body in the way that they need to. And that's what you have to do if you're going to get there.
Right.
I don't have to break my body to get we both talked to Brandon Lilly. I mean, that's what's required. Like he was on the same level as the guy that I used to hang out with. Right. And that's what's required to get there. And so there's a trade-off. And you and I might go lift some weight, but we're not trying to get there. But we're still trying to get better. We understand. We can watch those guys and see what they did and get stronger, but we're not trying to get to the top of that pyramid.
Of that hierarchy, right.
Exactly.
So it's okay that you're not on the same hierarchy path or track as somebody else. Like, go find a different hierarchy.
Yeah.
Maybe that one's not interesting to you. Cool. Find a better one. Find a different one. Find one that's more engaging, and then be the best at that.
Yeah.
Like, there isn't one, right? There's actually probably an infinite number of hierarchies that you could ascribe to and work up the ladder. I mean, it's just find something that's engaging to you and be the best at it. Now, some guys will say, well, Ryan, you're talking, not every guy needs to be a hunter. Yeah, you're right. I didn't say every guy needs to be a hunter.
Yeah.
Maybe you're an artist, or you write books, or you sing songs, or whatever, and you're still providing and you're still being the best. That doesn't make you any less of a man. You're still providing. You're still working. You're still exerting yourself. So I say just do it in a way that's meaningful for you. There's many ways that we can fill this mantle of masculinity. It isn't one path. It isn't my path. It's just that we're all trying to get to these certain roles, which is protect, provide, preside, these certain roles. And there's many ways to go about doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So sovereignty. Tell me what, obviously I have the quote here because I pulled it out, but tell me what that means to you. What is a sovereign man?
So a sovereign man is a man who has accepted complete and total responsibility for himself. Now, it doesn't mean that he's not willing to accept help or receptive to new ideas and new information that will improve himself, or even that he has to walk the path alone. It just means that he has taken ultimate responsibility for his life, and he has limited him being subject to other people, other institutions, governments, organizations, etc. So there's a lot of ways that we fulfill that, but what I've noticed is that too many men give away control, power, authority of their life by not accepting responsibility for it, by becoming, maybe not even becoming a victim, but choosing to stay in victimhood, right?
Right.
There's two victims. There's one who's actually a victim, and we've all been victims in our life, right? Like,
sure.
People have taken advantage of me or stolen from me in the past, and I'm a victim of that. But I'm not going to choose to remain in that victimhood.
Right.
And that's what most people do. And when you do that and you say, hey, the reason I'm where I am is because my parents didn't teach me, or because I had a bad upbringing, or the economy's bad, or the president's an asshole, or my wife is a bitch, or whatever, like fill in the blank with your reason, and you continue to live your life under the idea that it's somebody else's responsibility to help you have the life that you're after, you're giving away your sovereignty. You're enslaving yourself to other people and outside circumstances. Because now what you do is, if it's somebody else's fault or responsibility, you just have to wait and hope that somebody's going to do what's in your best interest. And very rarely will that happen. It's even if they help to some degree, it's always going to be inferior to what you can do for yourself. So sovereignty is about taking accountability and responsibility for your life. And when things happen, external circumstances, and they do, sometimes shit happens. You pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, you inoculate yourself for the next go around, and you figure out a way to improve yourself and get better.
Yeah. I mean, it's taking responsibility for yourself.
Right. It's interesting because I think in a lot of ways society has really perpetuated this idea that it's somebody else's responsibility. Like, it's the government's responsibility to ensure that you're happy, or it's your employer's job to ensure that you have a job, or your wife's job to make sure you're fulfilled, or the president's job to make sure that the economy is running smoothly. It's like, no, it's not. It's their job to clear the way, if anything, but then it's your job to make sure that you get what it is you're after.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's your life. It's not, if you just let them run it for you, then
which is fine. Look, here's the thing. If you want other people to run your life, fine, by all means do that. But don't complain about the lack of results that you're experiencing.
Right.
Hey, that's the path you decided to walk. You want somebody else to dictate your life, then that's the path. I think about that in employment. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that in order to be a sovereign man, you have to own your own business. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Right. Most people should not.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that if you decide to be an employee of an organization, like you were talking about earlier, there's some trade-offs, which means that your schedule isn't as flexible. Your potential income may not be as high. You may not have as much flexibility about the way that you go about doing certain things, which, if you're upset about that, then you choose a new path. Don't expect that somebody is supposed to acquiesce to your every wish and desire. Like, that's the path you chose to walk. You don't like that path? Get off that path and walk over to the other one that sounds more appealing to you.
Well, yeah, and there's also the thing that people do with jobs, the who moved my cheese thing, or whatever, where they expect that job is going to be there forever, and they're never going to have to change or improve their skills or get better in any way.
Right.
And that's just, I got the job, so I'm just going to camp here until I retire. And I was taught in my corporate jobs, very early, you're always looking for a new place to provide value. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're if you want a promotion, you have to, same thing that you're talking about with, men generally, is that, if you want a promotion, if you want whatever, you're like, how can I make myself more valuable so that I can get this thing? Because it's your responsibility to do that.
Right. Not somebody else's responsibility to say, hey, Jack, here's the things you could be doing if you want to get a promotion. It's like, that's nice, but who's going to do that?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Or you have to go and, a lot of people will go find a mentor, or find someone who can give you that advice of what you need to do. And that's good too. Because then you're still taking action because you're trying to find the advice, which is also
right. You exerted yourself.
Yeah, yeah. All good advice. I mean, I found, well, a lot of us, all the way up to Jordan Peterson, end up giving good dad advice. Really, is what we're doing in many cases. But like you said, a lot of people just haven't gotten
Right.
that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's millions and millions of men who never received that advice. And then what's interesting, and I'll tell you what, I felt like this for a long time too, because I wasn't around a whole lot of men as I was growing up.
Sure.
I was very intimidated by masculine men
Yeah.
because I didn't understand the level of assertiveness. I didn't understand their tone, their demeanor. I didn't get it. And then I interpreted it as being rude or being an asshole or being scary. And this might sound funny to a lot of people listening, but there's millions of young men who are in that boat. And they're so intimidated by masculine men. They're like, I don't know what I need to do. And so they just kind of revert and crawl back and live in that rut that they've been living in. It's a really interesting phenomenon. I know what it feels like because I was there, So we misinterpret these signals from other men.
Oh, 100%. And the only way to fix that is to actually hang out with those guys long enough to absorb some of it and like, oh, okay. All right.
I got it.
Yeah, exactly. And just, I always tell a story of my best friend when I decided to go on this path, and I got out of doing corporate stuff and got a job delivering exercise equipment. And, literally had to be shown how to use a ratchet. And had no background in anything like that.
How would you know that? Right.
Yeah, exactly. I just didn't have that skill set. And but yeah, the guy who's still like one of my best friends, Jesse, he was a guy I rode around with, all day. And he's like, his heroes, John Wayne. His dad was went to Nam twice. He's that guy,
right.
And he's a blustery dude. And first time I remember him looking at me, he was like, does that one have to ride with me? He's a hard dude, but then hard to gold. Once you get past it, you figure out what all this is about, and just having to. I mean, I had a couple confrontations with him, early on, where I just had to stand up for myself because I was like, and that's why we're still friends, So I think that.
Well, I think we do that to each other as men because. Even I don't know if this is evolutionarily hardwired into us, but we do that because I need to know who's going to bitch out on me in a rough situation.
Sure.
Right. And so I'm going to bust your balls. It doesn't mean I don't like you. It means I'm testing you. Like, I got to test you. You're standing next to me. Like, we're in this battle together. So I got to know that you can handle at least a little verbal jousting.
Right.
Or a physical beatdown. Cause I know you've done some MMA stuff and we're talking about jujitsu. Like, that stuff's good. Like, when you roll jiu-jitsu with somebody, you can find out pretty quickly what this guy's all about. Is this the guy I want on my team or not? Like, that's important to know for men. So we do these things verbally, physically. We play mental games, and people interpret that as like, oh, they're being dicks or assholes to each other. No, we're testing each other. And the ones who are up for the challenge rise and improve, and the ones who aren't part of the club. See ya.
Yeah.
Can't be here with us.
Absolutely. And a lot of guys, just like you said, they haven't had enough experience. Sometimes you could push. People don't realize that they have it in them.
Sure.
With jiu-jitsu, I've definitely seen that. Like you roll with somebody, and then I remember telling one guy, he was a little bit older, and it was just like, more savage. And I'm like, you need to like, you can push harder. Like right. you can do that, but do it like you're trying to hurt me.
Yeah, like actually try to. I have that conversation with my oldest son because he's a pretty tender-hearted kid.
Right.
He's big and strong, but he's tender-hearted. And I'm like, dude, like, hurt me. And he's like, well, I don't want to hurt you. I'm like, we're doing this in a controlled environment. Like, I'll let you know if it hurts. I'll tap or whatever. Like, you'll know. But like, I want you to actively like try to hurt me. Like, do it as hard as you can. And it was really cool to see that actually come on for a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, you get that going. Because that's where the excitement is, right? When you're actually, that's where the fun happens.
Well, there has to be a level of risk. And I think this is especially true for men. Like, if you're engaging in activities that don't have some inherent risk involved, it's boring, it's lame. So we, I think as men generally tend to gravitate towards things that have some element of risk. We do some events, and one of the things that we do very like right off the bat is we play airsoft with the guys.
Nice.
And it's funny because some of them are like, oh, what if it hurts? I'm like, it's supposed to hurt. That's what makes it fun. If
Yeah,
it didn't hurt, then it wouldn't be fun. So you've got to embrace the pain and the potential risk,
Right.
which is just a little welt on your arm, not a big deal. But you've
Right.
got to embrace that if you want to have the excitement that comes with it. Otherwise, it's just not exciting.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, talk to me a little bit about protect, provide, preside, because I like these a lot. They line up with some stuff I want to talk about, and
Okay,
and
yeah.
how did you come up with these three things?
Yeah, so I want to like tip my hat to David Gilmour. I know you've read that book. I believe Manhood in the Making.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he talks about so what he did is he identified different cultures throughout all of the planet and throughout all of history that and how they defined masculinity, like how they
Sure.
viewed men, how they defined masculinity. And it was really interesting because he found cultures that had never been introduced to each other or exposed to each other that looked at masculinity very much the same way.
Yeah.
And that was that of a protector, provide, and his third component is he talked about procreation.
Okay.
So that was his three tenets or core attributes of masculinity based on these different cultures and tribes and societies.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I've been introduced to some information through my church that I belong to, and
Sure.
it was interesting because I was reading through one of the documents, which is called a family proclamation,
Mhm.
and in it they define a husband and a father and a man's role, and they also define a woman and a mother and a wife's role. And it was interesting because in that document it says protect, provide, and preside. Preside is synonymous with leadership. So this isn't a new concept. This is a
No.
concept that I borrowed, from that, which was borrowed from somewhere else.
Sure.
But I like the preside element of it better than the procreate because I think there was some misconception in that, because I've heard from a lot of guys who, for example, can't have children, right? Like
Yeah.
they can't have children. So does that mean they're less of a man? No, it doesn't. You can still father. You can act as a father, maybe not your biological father, but you can still be a father in a young man's life. But yeah, maybe you don't procreate necessarily.
Mhm.
So that's where that came from. Protect, provide, preside. And I've implemented that in my life. So when I measure the activities and the things that I'm doing, I measure it according to that. Is this helping me become a more capable protector, provider, or presider? And if it is, I move towards it. And if it doesn't or detracts from that or moves me further away, then I make a conscious effort to eliminate those things from my life and from my activities.
Awesome. That's really interesting. We talked about the Manhood in the Making book before. Like, I think I read that as research for my first ever book. So I actually read that book in like 2006.
Is that right? Yeah.
So it's on my bookshelf and I have it and whatever. It's been a while. So I actually wasn't aware of that and of that part, anymore. The protect, provide, preside part of it. But what's in
that's his component.
his is procreate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. It lines up with a whole bunch of other tripartite systems, and that's what's really interesting to me. There's a guy called Georges Dumézil who came up with a trifunctional system of Indo-European societies. Basically, that they had three structures, and at the top is the sovereign.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, at the top is the sovereign, which is actually, obviously the king role, and it's actually split between kind of a mad king and a justice-oriented king, because you have to have the creative king and the guy who makes sure that the rules are in place.
Almost that chaos and order kind of scenario.
100%.
Right.
Yeah. But
so look at sovereign, reign, right? Reign is the root word, reign, to rule.
Yeah. It actually has a kind of funky etymology. I actually looked it up the other day because I was like, I'm waffling on whether I want to use that word too for the same role.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many. It's basically the father role. The father creates order, makes sure everything happens. Like in terms of in the big picture, it's the order creator. In Germanic, it'd be the All Father Odin. It creates the world. The same Sky Father role. And all this goes back to the Proto-Indo-Europeans or whatever in his system, but it is true around the world, which is even more interesting. The word that we get, Dios, or whatever for, comes from what they've theorized has been a Sky Father, is common to all these religions.
Interesting.
And So he has the sovereign role, and then the second one is obviously the military role.
Mm-hmm.
So all the warriors, the kshatriya, the knights, whatever, in every culture, that's the second tier.
Mm-hmm.
And those are both, kind of part of the same system. And then the third role is the productive class, which is the farmers, the workmen, like everybody who keeps society going.
Sure.
And so, I actually came around to this when I was doing a series of rituals that were Germanic pagan, and they have three gods: Odin, Thor, and Frey, and they actually symbolize the same things, which are like the All Father guy, then the warrior character, and then there's the god of fertility or so forth.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's the same basic ideas. And then this is Plato came up with a tripartite model of the soul.
Okay.
Which is basically the idea that the soul is a chariot, and you drive the driver of the chariot has to be logos, which is logic and reason, and the guy who's in charge and whatever. And then there's the two horses, and one of them is Thumos and one of them is Eros. Thumos is obviously associated with warriors, and that's kind of spirited. I'm seeking justice. If I have to fight for it, I'm going to get it. And then Eros is more like, what desire, like but desire also goes into hunger and what you actually just need to run the world.
Right. Ambition. Right. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and so like all those things can be good, but they have to be driven by reason. And so like, it's the same three things over and over and over again. Right. And that's why, and I could be, a lot of people would look at that and be like, well, Ryan's doing this protective art, but I have to come up with something different. But the fact that we're saying the same thing over and over again means that we're right.
Exactly.
Well,
you know what's funny about this is people will say things like, and this goes back to an earlier conversation, they'll say things like, well, who are you to determine what masculinity is? Nobody. I'm just a man. Like this has been suggested throughout hundreds of thousands of years by all cultures and all societies, many of which have never been introduced or influenced by one another. So all I'm doing is sharing what it means. Like I haven't defined this.
Right.
We as a human species have defined it throughout all of these cultures, all of history, and here it is. And that's why we see elements of truth in all religions and all doctrine and all philosophy is very much similar, some differences, but very much at the foundational level, very, very similar because it's eternal truth and principle. Yeah.
I mean, men have had the same problem for all of you. They have the same role and they have the same problem, since dudes walked out in the woods and made a fire, like, well, we have to protect the fire because we're all our families here. We have to protect it. And then, well, how are we going to keep this camp going? Well, I guess we're going to have to start.
We should organize this in a way that'll be productive, and let's keep our resources safe, including our women. Women.
Sure.
And I'm delicate in the way that I say this is like a resource, right? Like my wife. It's weird to say it that way. I understand, but like she's a resource. Like she's a supporter. She's a nurturer. She's my partner, and she gives me children, which is also important to my posterity. Like it's weird to say it like that. I understand, but if you understand the context and the nuance of the way I'm saying it, you would understand that men protect. We protect that which we value.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we wouldn't have to. I understand why you're doing it, but we wouldn't have had to dance around that 500 years ago. They would have been like, exactly. We'll give you the woman and the gold and the horses and the land. They are resources. That men understood that, but we have to. You don't want to come off the wrong way. Yeah,
I don't want to be misinterpreted.
Exactly. I understand that 100%. So that's. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing that this has been repeated all over and over and over again, and the idea that we should just make up something new because some people sat around in a university and be like, how about what if society doesn't have to be that way? Let's just destroy that and have no idea of what's supposed to replace it.
Well, it's an ironic thought considering that these people are the beneficiaries or the recipients of the very thing they rebel against.
Absolutely.
Right, like. You are a recipient of men's sacrifices and toil and blood and sweat and tears. And the only reason that you can say that is because of men have made it so.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of I think it's in A Few Good Men where Jack Nicholson is talking about as the general talking about or scolding somebody, and I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's upset that this individual is the beneficiary of these warriors sitting on the wall and then has the audacity to demand or dictate how they defend the wall.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
if you have a better way of doing this, come on out. We'll welcome you, and you can actually embrace in this challenge, but you won't. You'll sit behind the wall and enjoy all the luxuries that come from those who protect the wall. Like, and it's fine. You know, I think about that as a former military member. Like, it's fine. You know, if somebody wants to believe that, that's great. That's some of the things that I fought for, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, when things get difficult, and I wrote this in the book, it's a lot like, you know, when you walk into an office building and you see like an emergency box on the wall and maybe it has a fire extinguisher, or in some cases you actually see like an axe in there and it says, in case of emergency, break glass.
Right.
That's a little bit about what society has done to men. Like, oh, no, you just go sit over there and don't bother anybody. Don't talk to us. You're not going to dictate any of this. And if there's an emergency, we'll break the glass and we'll let you know. And then you can come be men. That's what society has seemed to do. And obviously I don't ascribe to that or believe that that's the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, there's evidence that has kind of always a little bit been a part of it. Like the warrior class has always been like, those guys are death. Like I don't know if we want them in the village. You know, there's an aspect of that. Like, I mean, obviously we've worked it out, you know, in over, you know, history, every society kind of works that out differently. But there has definitely been a perception there going all the way back to the earliest societies of like those guys who just got done slaying a lot of people, like like
they just don't understand them or relate to, you know.
Yeah.
And even now in the military, like those are some dark people.
Oh yeah.
You know, like their humor and the way that military members talk about things and activities and experiences, especially those who have been in horrific tragedies and brutal combat, they're operating on a different level that most people don't understand, can't relate with, and that's fine. That's why those warriors are there, so that most of society doesn't have to experience that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, that's the tricky thing, obviously, for a lot of those guys. I'm sure you've had that conversation a bunch of times, is that you're trying to bridge that gap when they're done with that.
Right. How do you reintegrate now? Yeah.
That's a lot of them have problems with that, but, and then, you know, a lot of them do great at it too. It's, you know, either way, but it's definitely an interesting thing. And there's some definitely, actually with SHOT Show, the one we were both at, I remember walking past the conversation of a guy who is pretty local, who I've hung out with a couple of times now. And I just walked past the conversation with him saying, the thing about killing kids is, and I'm like, that's not something you hear every day.
You would never hear that anywhere else.
No,
on the battlefield or at SHOT Show or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's the nicest guy and would never hurt anyone for, you know, who didn't deserve it. You know, like whatever. But you know, they have to deal with that reality, and when you're sheltered like that, you don't have to. You know,
which again is the luxury of modern times, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful blessing, but we can't forget those who defend our way of life, those who make these types of sacrifices, those who have to quite literally go into the darkness and combat that monster and that demon and enemy. Like that, we owe at least a debt of gratitude to those individuals.
Oh, that's good too. Actually, that reminds me of that's another thing, is that when men are initiated, in all cultures, they're initiated, you know, it's called a liminal space, a threshold space. And because that's actually how you become a man, is that you have to face some kind of chaos or ordeal.
Right.
And that's our job, is to go out in that perimeter zone that's scary. And because that's where men become men. They can't become men in the part where it's safe. They have to go out into the border zone where it's maybe not safe.
Right, of course.
And that's where initiation always happens in like every culture. And that's the other thing I was just researching the other day, because I was looking at Hercules and warrior archetypes and so forth, is that there's one of the oldest phrases that they've constructed in myth is "he killed the dragon."
Mm.
And that's the warrior guy. That's what's always said about him, is the warrior god always killed the dragon.
Slay the dragon, right?
Yeah. And obviously that's why he's the hero. He had to go out and do that thing.
Yeah.
But
It's another part of initiation and rituals for young men entering manhood is being literally separated from their mother. Right?
Yes.
You're taken away from the women, and you are no longer with the women. You are now with the men, and you have to. And the way I've heard it said is you atone with the father, meaning you atone with the men. You become one with the men through not only their sacrifices and honoring that, but sacrificing yourself. And then you're actually marked in a lot of these cases, like physically marked, that you have now gone through this process, whether it's circumcision or other, bodily marks, tattoos, things like this, that illustrate you have done what it is you need to do, and you are embraced now by the men as a man. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, as we've both said many times, only men can create men. And so you have to go out into that other space to make that happen.
Right.
And
a lot of people ask that. They'll ask that even on social media. Is like, how I had a guy earlier this morning say it. He says, I've been raised by my mom and primarily around women. Like, how do I become more manly? You said this earlier. You go spend time with manly men.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
100%.
And you're going to learn from them, and you're going to develop, and you're going to grow, and you're going to expand into the influences you're around, which is other men. If you continue to stay around women, which is fine. Like, I love women. My mom's a woman. My wife's a woman. My daughters will be a woman. I like being around women. I like that presence. But I also want to be around, at times, exclusively men doing man things, and that's good too.
Yeah, and actually that feeds into something else that I really like about your message, and that we agree on, and I like to see you say it, because and I've said this before. I like to see you say it because you're married and have kids and whatever, and it has more weight when you say it because of that. But one of the things you wrote in the book is a man is responsible and accountable to himself first, and the idea that you have to take care of yourself and become a man and have your own identity as a man separate from all these other things.
Right.
Rather than having your identity dependent on your wife or depending on your kids or whatever, like, you have to continually become a man and have this thing that is you and take care of it.
Yeah. The problem with wrapping up your identity in external circumstances, and marriage is an external circumstance because it takes two people. So it's no longer internal. There's an element of internality, but there's also this external factor, which is your wife, your partner.
Sure.
So you need to be who you are independent of those external circumstances. Like, if you asked 100 people, hey, tell me about yourself. Tell me who you are. Tell me about yourself. They're always going to start with their job.
Right.
Oh, I'm a police officer, or I'm a school teacher. It's like, well, that's what you do, but that's not really who you are, because any of that can be stripped away at any given moment. Same thing with a marriage. You and your wife could go through a divorce or a separation. She could die, right? There's a lot of things that could potentially happen. And if you wrap up your identity completely in external circumstances, when that goes away, then you're left with, well, who the hell am I? Like, you don't even know yourself. You can't even spend time. You don't even want to look yourself in the mirror. This is why soldiers have such a difficult time transitioning into civilian life, because they wrapped up their identity in being a warrior. And now they've retired, or they've been medically disqualified from military service, and they are no longer a warrior, and they've completely lost themselves. Yeah. So you have to focus on who you are individually and internally. And as you continue to do that work, then you can focus on the externals, like your wife and your children and the people that you want to serve in the neighborhood, and all of these other factors that you care about. And it's good. You should want to do those things, but you've got to take care of yourself first and be a man independent of these other factors. Absolutely,
man. That is so important. And, and it's hard to do in modern life, especially with guys who have families, because there's a lot of time. Like, it's hard to organize the time. Like, I've talked to a lot of guys about this, just even on the podcast, of like, making adult friends as a man is tricky. Yeah, I mean, like
Yes, it really can be.
you have to work on that. You have to set aside time to like, well, I need to go hang out with the guys or this guy or whatever on this day. Because otherwise I have stuff going on at home. I have a job, I have all the stuff I need to do.
Yeah.
And if you don't make the time for it, all of a sudden you don't have any friends.
Right.
And that's a tricky thing. I think a lot
That's
of
an
men
issue.
struggle with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I call them noble obstacles, right? So
Yeah.
a noble obstacle would be your wife, your kids, your neighbors, your job.
Right.
These are all responsibilities you have,
Sure.
right? So they're noble. But it becomes a problem when you're using them as an excuse not to take care of yourself. That's where it becomes an obstacle to your growth and progress. So it's noble. And this is the thing, like if you were trying to decide between taking care of yourself or, going and getting shit faced on Friday night, that would be an easy decision for most people to make
Right.
because there's no nobility in that.
Right.
But if you're trying to decide between taking care of yourself and going to little Timmy's baseball game, okay, that's an infinitely more difficult decision to make because there's nobility, right? There's honor in going to little Timmy's baseball game.
Sure.
So this is where it becomes a problem is when it's noble, it's something that you value, it's something frankly you ought to be doing anyways, but if it's coming again at the expense of you, then it's an issue and you need to plan out your time better. Or here's another way. Become more capable so that your time, and I'm talking specifically from a career aspect, but that your time is now more valuable.
Yeah.
So the time that you spend away doing work and pursuing career interest is now worth 2, 3, 4, 10 times as much as it was worth previously, and therefore you're more efficient. You have more time to do these other things like take care of yourself and spend time with little Timmy and Susie and whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that kind of rolls into, talking about our groups. And we've talked a lot about how, men make men and you need a group of men to make men. And obviously you're involved with the Iron Council
Yeah.
thing. And I think that a lot of guys have this lone wolf thing that they don't need any other guys to be around. And I like that you're out there supporting the idea that, yeah, you actually you are not the alpha all the time.
Right.
And that, that you need to go out and find other guys.
Right.
So
a lot of people think that's weakness. Like a lot of men think it's weak. Like, oh, if I need help or I need assistance or I want this guy in my life, then I'm weak. No, you're actually weaker if you're doing it by yourself. There's nobody to cover your flanks, right? There's nobody to tell you, hey, you're screwing up. You got to fix some things. Nobody's there to tell you that if you're doing it by yourself. So you're actually weaker alone, like strength in numbers, right? That's something everybody's heard. Why? Because it's true. There is strength in numbers, and it's exponential strength.
Yeah.
It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 10, right? That's the power of banding together with other men.
Oh, absolutely. And, like I said earlier before we started the podcast, I wanted to keep this mostly evergreen, but I think that now a lot of things that we've been saying are becoming more obvious to a lot more people.
Yeah.
Because, okay, everybody's, in the sheltering at home or whatever right now. So we're actually all separated. So what you can't do after this podcast is go out and go meet a bunch of guys.
Right.
True. And that's what unfortunately we've all been saying this, but I think it's highlighting why you needed them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it's not always going to be something like this, and there's all kinds of people saying different kinds of things, but if something got a lot worse, you want to be all alone?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
I want people that have my back and that support me and can provide resources and that can assist me just like I would want to do for them.
Absolutely. And I think I'm hoping that as far as silver linings, as far as we get out of this situation, I think a lot of people a lot of this foolishness, I think, is going to be, it could go one of two ways. And it could be, please take care of us.
Yes.
Please, everyone take care of us. Let this never happen again, which I think is foolish because obviously they weren't able to do it the first time. But,
we're letting, this goes back to the earlier conversations. Like,
yeah,
if you think somebody else is going to, or you're begging for somebody else to take care of you, you are giving away your sovereignty.
Oh, 100%. Well, you become a slave.
Enslaving yourself to those people. or
Yeah,
those
yeah, absolutely.
governments or organizations, whatever.
But, a lot of people I could see people going that direction, but I think a lot of people, there's been a lot of stories about people who were against guns until this happened. They went to the gun store like right
Isn't that
away.
interesting? Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people are waking up to like, well, okay, if I just tried to gentrify a bad neighborhood, and now I'm stuck in the middle of a bad neighborhood that could get really bad really
Yes.
quick. And who's going to help me? Who's
Right.
going to defend me? I mean, like, like when people start breaking my windows and trying to take my stuff, like that. I think that people are really starting to realize that, hey, I might need a man around. Hey, if I'm a man, I might need to be capable of handling some of these situations, or at least like thinking about that this is my role to handle them.
I like that you're talking about capability. That word, I've really honed in on that word over the past year or so, is capability, because you make the distinction between being a good man and being a capable man, right? And they're distinct. They're not mutually exclusive, right? But they are distinct. So I think a lot of guys out there have been good men, like good little boys, right?
Sure.
They're virtuous. They're honorable. They do what they're supposed to be doing, and they're good. They're nice people. And then you have these men over here who are capable, right? I think your goal is to be both. You need to have some level of morality, a moral code that you ascribe to, and you need to be capable of honoring and upholding that code. Because if you have a code, but you can't maintain the integrity of the code because you're weak and pathetic and cowardly, and not capable, then the code isn't really worth anything in the first place. So I really like the distinction that you make between, all right, good man, good at being a man. That's important that you make that distinction, understand they're two different things.
Yeah. And as I've gone on, I mean, I think, I was looking for men who were good at being men when I was trying to learn that.
Of course.
And then, but going through the rest of my life, I want to be surrounded by good men who are also good at being men. I think that it's good to have both. Because otherwise you have really sketchy dudes who are really good at being men, and that's a scary guy to be around.
Right, and I think these are the individuals who, we would look back historically and say, okay, well, maybe they were capable, but they weren't moral, and so these are dictators, these are tyrants, these are criminals. These are people who are highly capable of certain skills, but they don't have the morality to back it up.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I originally started talking about that, it's easy you can talk about the mafia or whatever, like very capable.
No doubt, nobody would argue. I even think about Hitler as horrific as the things he did. Obviously, he inspired people. Obviously, he led people. There's elements that you kind of wonder, how in the world did an individual and a human being do what he did? And so, short of saying I'm inspired by that, I'm certainly not. It's very fascinating that he had this skill set, but he didn't have the morality, obviously, to go with it. And that made him evil, one of the most evil human beings to ever walk the planet.
Yeah. And he took a lot of meth and he invaded Russia, which is a terrible idea always.
Not a smart thing to do. Obviously,
never try and take over Russia. Everyone just stop.
Did not work out well for him.
Yeah. But, as far as moving into the future, obviously, like I said, right now, a lot of guys are at home. Later, that might not be the case, like a few months down the road or whatever. But what do you think guys should be focused on right now? I mean, obviously, I think there are two guys. And there's the guy who was ready for this in some way and is already pretty much there and prepared for it. And then there's guys who are maybe really just like the guys who were saying, who were maybe just picking up the way of men or sovereignty, or just hearing about this and thinking, hey, maybe I need to think about some of this stuff for the first time. I mean, what should they be doing now as they're sitting in their house, not be able to do anything else?
So rather than tell you the specifics, we can get into that, but I work best for me personally under frameworks.
Yeah.
It just helps me wrap my head around concepts that sometimes can be difficult to understand, or you don't have the framework to go with it. So I look at 4 different things. So number 1 is you have calibration. And I look at calibration as getting right with your mind, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, getting yourself right.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have connection. So these are the relationships that you're working on, relationship with spouse and kids and neighbors and colleagues, coworkers, family, etc. Then you have condition. That's your physical health, your sleep, your nutrition, your strength, your stamina, all that sort of thing. Your capability, martial arts, that kind of thing. And then you have contribution, which is giving back. And in order to give, you have to have, right? You can't give what you don't have. So contribution is becoming a man of value. So how do you improve the value that you offer to the world? Is it new skills? Is it new information? Is it writing a book? Is it earning a new credential or a degree or designation that will serve you? So if you look at those 4 areas and you say, okay, well, what can I do in each of those 4 areas? Let's take condition, for example. Maybe you're at 30% body fat and your goal ought to be, hey, you know what? I'm going to get down to 25 or 20% body fat over the next 90 days. That's something well within your control, even in the situation that we're dealing with now.
Absolutely.
If you look at condition, hey, you know what? Like maybe you and your wife are going through a spell right now and you're having a hard time. What a perfect opportunity for the next 30, 60, 90 days, or even a year where you're in close proximity to each other to begin to develop a more significant, powerful relationship. And you do some specific things there, like honor her and include her in the conversation and learn how to communicate with her effectively and cast vision for her and the family. If you look at the calibration component, maybe it's spirituality. You know, maybe you want to read from the Bible, or you want to learn to meditate, or just be more mindful, or be more still and present, or pray, or whatever. Like there's practices that you can do, but if you look at it in the context of each of those frameworks, I think pretty quickly you'll start to see and identify what it is specifically you can be doing. And then also look at it in the context of the protect, provide, preside. So protect. Am I a good protector? Maybe you're somewhere on the scale, good, bad, excellent, not at all, but just move the scale, like just improve your capabilities. So, okay, well, I don't know how to shoot a gun. Well, that'd be a good thing to learn. Or I've never been in a physical altercation. A little difficult now, but you can roll around with your kids, right? You can do something like that. If you look at provide, you might look at your food storage and say, we don't have any. Well, that might be something that you want to focus on, or we have enough to get us through 30 days. Great. How do you make it 60 days? Well, what do you need to buy right now? And it's probably not toilet paper, but you know, what else do you need to buy that might shore up your provisions that you may need? So if you look at it in the context of these frameworks and then start identifying little things that you can do to improve your situation, I think you'll identify them pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, like basically baby steps at the moment.
Just improve. Like you don't need to be have it done. You just need to go from here to here. And then when you're here, then you go to here and you'll get there.
Yeah. Commit to the direction.
Exactly.
You know, and then take steps along the way.
I like that.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I think we can probably wrap up here.
Excellent, man. Appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything that, this will probably come out on Monday. Is there anything you want to have people go to see?
Just check out the podcast, Order of Man, if you listen to podcasts, or check out the website, orderofman.com. You mentioned it earlier, and you'll find what we're doing. Or hit me up. I'm pretty active on Instagram at Ryan Michler, so you can find me there, and I'm pretty engaged over there. So.
All right, man. Yeah, excellent conversation. Thank you.
Brother. Appreciate you.
All right,